Hello and welcome to another week of Leadership Lessons from Across the Pond with me, Nancy Halpern, my colleague and friend, Julian Roberts. This week, we're talking about how do you manage average performers. We've talked about difficult talent, flight risk. We're working our way down to the average. So, Julian, before we dive in, how are you?
I'm very well and always better for seeing you.
Oh, you charmer, you. I feel exactly the same. So, Julian, I thought I'd start us off by asking you how you define average.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's even that expression when you said, we're coming down to the average, and
Mm.
it has a connotation of being quite negative, doesn't it? Oh, I'm the average performer, not very good, and just a bit not lighting up the sky. I guess for me, average is somebody who's delivering consistently. That would be my definition, really, simplistically as that. And the reason I say because that's where I think most people operate in. I mean, as in, there's a lot of people in our organizations that are average. I don't like the word average, but who are delivering consistently. They're not lighting up the sky. They're not pushing the big boundaries, but they're delivering. And I think that's good. That's okay. That's fine. Let's not striving for excellence in every shape and form, because sometimes that can be quite exhausting.
Well,
you know
not just for the individual, but for the manager, because
yes.
So actually, I'm really glad that we're starting with this. That it is seen somehow like a C in the U.S. is theoretically an average grade, but
Yeah.
any kid who has to bring a C grade back to their parent is probably going to get into trouble. And so it's really this notion of average being a black mark against you. Where do you think of average more as a meets expectation? For example, you were doing the job you've been hired to do, or does it have a slightly different connotation still?
I think it's, as I said, it's delivering consistently on the objectives, on the goals that you've been set. For me, a superstar is somebody who is pushing the boundaries, coming up with perhaps new ideas, and really excelling in that sense. So it's delivering. That is, to me, average, and I think that's okay, and that is
And,
fine.
and so then why would there be any challenge in managing that person? It sounds like all we
Well,
have to do is leave them alone, let them do their job day
no,
in,
you
day
see,
out, and everything's peachy keen.
no, you see, in
No?
some ways, I sometimes think the average performer, there is some untapped potential that we've perhaps not found yet or realized. And we have that sense of performance sort of versus sort of potential, don't we? We have a sense of what we're performing at within our role, but we also have a potential. And interestingly, I've got quite interested in the average performer, and I've often asked them what really excites them, what really matters to them, because often they might be in a role that perhaps doesn't really excite them, but they're delivering a good job, and that's fine, and that's okay. And sometimes work is not their big thing. They have other stuff outside of work where they may be knocking it out. They may be a very good athlete or a good DJ or whatever it may be. So something outside of work may be something where they're excelling at, and that might be their thing. But in a work context, I remember I had an individual who was working for me, and they were more in an operational role, and they were average, consistent, good, reliable, doing a great job in that sense. And I remember asking about them what really gets them, what matters to them, and it was about people, and it was interested in people. And this conversation started to happen, and this is one of the things I talk about, how to get the best out of people. And she started to share about HR and opportunities, and there was nothing obvious that we could sort of move her into in that position. And so I was aware of a project that was happening, more of an employee engagement project that was company wide, wanting people from different departments to be involved in. So she got involved in that. And it's interesting because it actually lit her up. And it really just motivated her, stirred her. She had all these ideas, creativity came out of her, but not only just in the context of what she was working on, but also in her actual day job. And suddenly she started to get a better pace about her. And so that was interesting, just tapping into something a bit more passionate that created a lot more motivation about who she was and what she was doing.
But was that also, in some ways, a mismatch between the individual and the job? I mean, I've noticed with my clients that a lot of times they will think that it's just not the right person. And so they may let that person go or move them on and fill it with a different person. And it still doesn't work. And I guess I'm coming loop to loop to a different point, but sometimes roles aren't really well designed. And roles are not designed around people. People are expected to slot into a role. And there's this exercise that I've asked some of my clients to do at times when they're really struggling with this idea, because in most leaders' minds, average still doesn't sound exciting. Because they're disappointed. Because somehow leaders and managers always expect more of their people. So I'll ask my clients, take a look at your org chart without a single name on it, just role. Now, ask yourself, is that an A role or a B role? And if it's an A role and you have, let's say B is average, right? Because the C is two harsh memories of children in grades. Right? So, can you afford? Is it okay to have a B player in an A role? Because if it isn't, then the way you think of that person as average is going to be lower. If it's a B person in a B role, it seems to me like a nice match. And that's not even talking about what you're describing, Julian, which is somebody, potentially, forgive using the word in that way, in the wrong role for them. And so how we define average, how we evaluate average isn't only do we bring judgment to it, but are our expectations out of whack because the role isn't well defined, the person is in a mission critical role without the skill set. There could be lots of other stuff going on that I think if we pulled back from the individual and we're a little bit more analytical about maybe the team need or the business need, we might actually do something differently.
Well, I agree with you. I think that you made a valid point there, and that's why I don't.
Well, I should hope I do.
And that's why I don't really like that whole average performer. It just, I don't know. It's not helpful. You're right. It's almost to get what role have we got? What role do we need? And what do we need skills? And who do we need to fill this? And what is their purpose in that context? Rather than getting into, I need a superstar, I need this. I mean, one thing to think about, what we need to do is look at our talent within our teams. And you may be familiar with the sort of that 9-box sort of talent sort of model.
Talent review. Yep.
And that's a good way in terms of not, because in fact they don't even use the word average in there. You mentioned one of the words mismatches.
Don't they use in place? Is that the term?
There's things like key players. There's people who are effective performers. So there's a whole host of stuff which are far more positive, and you want people in a variety of those positions because obviously it's plotting, performance and potential. The concerning ones are the ones who have got low performance and low potential, deemed as warning signs, which are the ones we're not going to talk about now, but they're the ones you got to think about what next for them. But I think it's important, and that's where, looking at your talent, what have I got and where are people at? And then how do I manage that appropriately to ensure that we grow our bench strength as opposed to, being careful? Because, having a dilution of lower performers will affect even the high performers. So the key thing is, we want to make sure that each year we're growing everybody at some point along the way in skills, motivation, and making sure that they are growing in their sort of career in some shape or form. Doesn't mean everybody can get a promotion, doesn't mean everybody can sort of do another higher level of a task, but you can still invest in them. And I think that's important, that you're growing your bench strength and have a mindset to do that. Because if you bring everybody up, it bolsters the whole team, doesn't it?
I'm not sure I 100% agree with that. I'm not. I mean, there was this great HBR article. It's quite dated, but it's evergreen, which is let's hear it for the B players. There are some, look at a baseball team. I mean, yes, if you have, baseball, I know, but you can translate it, right? If you have someone in the outfield they're not really involved in much of the game until they're really involved, right? That one moment, they're waiting for that one moment. Well, and then they have to do their job. And that's fine. I guess, they're not a B player outfielder, but there are lots of people who actually, they don't want to grow. They really don't. They want less, they don't want to do more work. They don't want to be more challenged. They're doing a fine job. Thank you very much. Because a lot of their life is not their work, and where they grow and where they invest their time and their energy. And as you said earlier, their passion is not in that job. And if they're doing a fine job without complaint, sometimes I think if you express an interest as a manager or leader in growing that person, they have no idea what they want to grow in because frankly, they're content. And
I agree with you. I agree again with you, and I'm agreeing far too agreeable today. I think is that
what's
and it
wrong
comes down.
with you?
I know. It comes down, and in some ways I disagree. The fact, or what I was explaining, is that it's important to ask people what matters to them.
Yes.
But I still believe, even if their passion is not their job and it might be outside of stuff, creating that employee engagement and motivation by helping them, and it might not be, I'm not talking about big training or coaching or mentoring or whatever it may be, but some form of them moving forward in some shape or form is really helpful for them. They might not realize that. It doesn't mean, they're going to go from 5 to 10 or to 15. They might go 5 to 7, but they're moving forward. And I think we should have a mindset that our talent grows in some capacity, but it's got to be based on our real conversations with people
and on their appetite for it.
Yes, if you go in somebody, right, I want everybody to grow, and someone's thinking that's just going to turn people off. But actually, if you have a conversation with people, knowing where people are at, knowing their commitment, knowing their energy, but actually, you still want them to have a growth mindset. That's the important thing, isn't it?
So I want to throw, yes, I do agree with that. I want to throw a question as we get towards our conclusion. What if the person you're managing, like you think they're average, whatever, in place, average, means that, but they don't agree with you. They think they're absolutely terrific. How do you deal with that kind of situation?
I had this once. I designed a competency model in my business and ranked everybody for development purposes. It was purely for development. It wasn't done on salary, anything like that. And I rolled it out, explained to everybody exactly how you did it. Everybody ranked themselves, and then I ranked them based on what I thought. And there's clear definitions, very clear. And this individual came to me, and I think the numbers between 1 and 4 being the highest. And on every parameter, they put 4 within their role. They were like superstar, the next, and in essence, they didn't need any developments. They were the finished article.
They had arrived.
And I remember I saw it, and I was like, and I had a different view, and we were poles apart. And I remember, and the conversation, and I had quite a good rapport, so good little banter was helpful and relationship. But I just said, look, okay, you think you're this? Just share with me some evidence that I could sort of be aware of that demonstrates these things. And as they started to unfold and share, they realized actually they weren't quite there. And so I didn't tell them they were less. I just said, oh, so you think of this? Okay, just what evidence? And they went, well, I thought this. And as they were thinking, yeah, perhaps it's not really a 4, it's more of a 3, isn't it? And so it was asking the question, which started to create a conversation and a realization, and we got to a nice point where we agreed. And from that, and the positive was, we then created a action plan to how we move forward.
So to reverse engineer this question, some people don't always get there on their own, and so I would say, as a leader, the responsibility is at least 50% yours. You may not have been clear enough about the expectations for the role and for that individual. And so the metrics against which they are evaluating themselves are actually not the ones that they need to know. So I think that goes back on you to be really crystal clear about those. And to know that a lot of times when people fill out those kind of forms, they're thinking, they sort of need to self-promote. So
although I think people are more negative on themselves
Typically, I would say
Generally,
typically,
and that's
80%.
why this individual I was quite surprised at, because actually most people are more negative.
Most, yes, are even falsely humble. But you still
Yeah.
got to deal with the one who isn't. So sadly, we are quickly out of time. So, Julian, I'd like to wish you a lovely week ahead,
You
and
too
I
as well, Nancy.
thank you. And I'll see you same place, same time next week.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Take care.
Bye, everybody, and thank you, Sarika, for your comments.